Welcome back to a new episode of Beyond Business, the podcast where we explore the human side of business. I'm Alex, and today you'll listen to a compelling story of a young German business school researcher, teacher, and entrepreneur across multiple countries and continents. We'll also talk about where education is going, how to create a startup, and other topics. Remember to follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn, and if you like the show, write a review on Apple Podcasts. They really help. Let's start. Today, I have the pleasure to talk to Alisa Sydow, Assistant Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at ESCP Business School, and also one of my professors. Hello, Alisa, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Alex. Thanks for having me invited. I'm very happy to be here with you.
It's our pleasure. So the first thing I think everyone's wondering is, who are you? What's your background? Could you give us a presentation, go into as much detail as you want of your background and sort of maybe explain a little better what I meant by researcher, teacher, and entrepreneur at the beginning?
Yes, of course. Happy to do so. So first of all, I'm this, let's say, crazy German girl living in Italy now already almost 8 years here in Milan. So I have joined Milan for my master degrees, and it was here at the Cattolica University back in Milan. And I was supposed to actually just do 2 years because I really wanted to study 2 years, have time on my own, because back then in Germany, in Hamburg, I did a dual program study. So I already worked at British American Tobacco, which was, let's say, for being 22, 23, quite intense. I finished there as a junior brand executive, so brand marketing. But I really needed to do a little bit of, let's say, Bella Vita, Dolce Vita, which I wanted to do for 2 years. But yeah, let's say after 2 years, I never got kind of the feeling that I actually really would like to go back to Germany. So instead, I got this strong feeling of, I also do not really want to go back to the corporate context. No idea why, but it was kind of really a strong feeling that I had. So I was really into the mood of learning more and more and more. I never got to the point in my university, let's say, life as a student, I never got to the point where I felt like, wow, now I'm fed up with studying, I know enough. And due to this, let's say, lack of feeling, I kind of got curious about doing a PhD, which I did, still at the Cattolica University. And the reason why I stayed, again, also in Milan, because I really enjoy living in Italy, and my passion around drinking wine, knowing more about wine and wineries and family businesses. But apart from that, I really was interested in the topic because the PhD was around entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship especially in Africa. And honestly, again, here, I do not really know why I then decided I really want to go for that. I had no reason why I really was interested in this African context and entrepreneurship, because let's say from my family background, they're all, let's say, rather typical Germans, no academics, not even studied, so not into entrepreneurship. My father is even a policeman, so my mom is a mom. So let's say no linked background to that. But me personally, I really got very excited about this idea, going to Africa, understanding how individuals can build up their businesses, although they face severe institutional voids, which means high level of corruption, lack of institutional support, no incubation system, no investors, maybe not even education, lack of internet connection, and all that stuff. So I decided to actually do the PhD in the background of entrepreneurship. And basically, as everyone who is really passionate about entrepreneurship, at the same time, you also get the feeling of, wow, I really would like to actually have this passion and the adventure and the up and downs of a real entrepreneur, because every time you talk to very great, successful, but even failure stories of entrepreneurs, you want to get on that hype too, in a way. So, of course, as a matter of fact, I also was really into the idea of sooner or later starting my own business. Yeah, and I did so. I did so together with a friend of mine from Argentina. And here we are getting into this connection of several different continents. Back with a friend of Argentina, but we met in Brazil, in Fortaleza, because in my first year of the master, I went for a volunteering program to Fortaleza, where I was the only German girl, only European person. I didn't talk Portuguese, but I was able to talk with my hands. So very helpful living in Italy already back then. And yeah, so we met there, never thought about starting a business together, but we kept on our friendship. And due to friendship and a lot of discussions, what we really would like to do in the future, we met with several values together. And the values were around, we love natural products, so all about eating and drinking, different cultures, and especially products that are, let's say, made as they were made 300 years ago by producers that are a family, because usually they tend to have the strong traditions and cultures from a specific context. Yeah, and that was the reason why we kind of launched back in 2017 our own business, which is called Nampelka. But it has been, let's say, a long, long journey, because, let's say, when I'm really honest, I think the first time that I thought I would like to have my own project was maybe already during my bachelor degree, but I was not really, let's say, strong enough to openly say it to friends, family, and colleagues, because I thought, no, you're stupid, you can never do that, and all those, yeah, unfortunately doubts that we might have.
Wow. Okay. So that's a great starting point. And the first thing I wanted to pick up on is the fact that you said it was quite intense to work in British American tobacco. So that, like, why is the natural question, but also I had a sort of more a deeper question I wanted to discuss with you, which is the first thing I think, at least. Well, I'm not a smoker, but in general, sort of tobacco. Big tobacco is seen increasingly worse as as an employer, like as a brand, as a kind of industry, also for the market power they have, or they used to have. And so what was it like to work in not only a big, like a corporate, a big company, but also one for which there are sort of potentially ethical reasons that may lead to someone not wanting to work in that kind of industry? Like, did you ever feel that kind of sort of contrast?
Yeah, very good question. A question that surprisingly I didn't ask myself when I was 18, because I applied for that right after finishing school, or even before finishing school, because it was a trainee program, let's say, and the entrance to this private university. I was very surprised by their culture. So it was for me the only interview and assessment center where I took the train from Hamburg back to my hometown, Hildesheim, arrived at home. I told my family, my parents, about the experience, and I enjoyed it. I didn't suffer. I really enjoyed meeting the colleagues, and it was a really nice atmosphere. So I felt like, wow, this is a really nice place. I enjoyed it, and I didn't really care about the products then. So as they told me, yes, you get the job if you want, I decided I not even decided, it was like almost decided before, and it was a natural flow saying, yes, definitely I want to join. The issue, especially, let's say, the ethical issues, I realized more and more working in the company, especially because my initial interests were around marketing, and more precisely brand marketing. So it is exactly every single day that you look at the packaging, you talk about the cigarettes, and you kind of think about making advertising that does not attract non-smokers, but the smokers that are already outside saying, please smoke a specific brand. And I kind of, because when you work there, and again, it's brand marketing, you have your 12 hours per day and so on. I really got kind of fed up by thinking about this is, let's say, my commitment to really create great advertising campaigns for a product which I do not consume personally, and I really don't believe that it's something that I really want to spend my time for. So I took the decision to work there because they really offered me a great training program. It was a great experience, great colleagues, great company culture. But for understanding to grow and your personal development, I realized that me personally, I'm not made for this specific business sector and those products, because I got the feeling of, I want to understand who I am, what are my values, and what is the contribution me, Alisa, I can do with my work, with my knowledge, with my experience on the society and for our future. So that is why I kind of really decided I need to stop, I need to quit, even if it's a safe future of top management. I decided I need to go because this is something that is not making me happy and is not providing me any, let's say, satisfaction. And this was the reason why I decided to go to Italy, study 2 years to have time to think about what I really want. And now, let's say, I don't know exactly how many years later, a lot of years later, I believe, that was the right choice. And I'm very happy that I made this choice, even though it was not easy, of course.
Yeah, and I just thought of a thing maybe that you didn't touch upon in your presentation, which is the ESCP. Like, how did you get to ESCP? Because that's another thing I'm interested also, like as a student, but in general, how does one reach a business school compared to a sort of public university that could be, I don't know, the Milano Statale or some other university?
So again, but I guess I was in a way quite lucky. So sometimes you also need to have a certain level of luck in some specific moments. So I did my PhD at the Cattolica University. I was in a way very convinced of that. I'm still convinced that I never ever want to leave 100% the university. I don't know how much I want to continue in university, because you never know, and the future, talking as a scholar of entrepreneurship, is not anymore predictable, so no idea. But I really do know that I really want to keep this connection. And so I continued also working at the CAS Business School due to several projects of entrepreneurship research in developing economies. And I did kind of a year 2019 back and forth for data collection in Kenya, sometimes in London for the CAS Business School, and then sometimes back in Milan, and then sometimes also back in Berlin for Nampelka and my startup, which has been, let's say, not very COVID-19 conform and very also exhausting, but also very, very interesting. I met a colleague of mine. He is based in the Berlin campus, who is working on the topics of entrepreneurship and decision-making processes under uncertainty. And we did a course together, or in other words, I participated in a course that he kind of trained coaches to understand how to teach the thing about entrepreneurship and decision-making processes. And he told me, by the way, Alisa, you want to stay in Italy? And I said, yes, actually, yes, I want to stay in Italy. And he said, how far is Turin from Milan? Could it be feasible? And I said, yes. And this was actually the way how I saw the job offer. And then, of course, I did the, let's say, traditional application process. And I needed to fight for my right to get the position as assistant professor at the ESCP. So in a way, it was luck, because I might not have seen this job offer. But now I'm very, very, very happy about this coincidence, because I'm very happy to be part of this family here at the Turin campus.
A thing you mentioned both in like the emails we exchange and also on your LinkedIn profile is the idea of the 360-degree perspective on research, teaching, and entrepreneurship. Could you speak a little bit more about that and why, like, how do you think this kind of perspective is useful, both for I don't know, an aspiring entrepreneur such as myself, or someone that is instead more interested in academia?
So entrepreneurship is different than other, let's say, areas, topics, departments when it comes to management. There is no way for finding one best way to explain and to teach what to do, the 10 steps in order to start your business. You might try to come up with something similar, but it is just impossible to have like generic rules of what to do. So that is why, in a way, you can study a lot and a lot and a lot, but it will be never ever possible to understand the same feelings, struggles, challenges, passions, pains, all the emotions that are involved with an entrepreneurial journey if you have never done it too. So in a way, for me, it is kind of something even as an experimentation. So for me, back in 2017, and this whole idea about starting your own business is because I really like to have this, let's say, even responsibility and freedom to make my own choices and decisions. But at the same time, I always thought it is something as an experiment that helps me to understand what I really teach. And I've every time seen those overlapping, let's say, synergy effects or areas between teaching, doing research, and being an entrepreneur. Because in the end, even if you are an entrepreneur in a specific business sector or whatever, you need to have even elements of a scholar because you need to become the next expert of exactly your business idea and you need to understand every single detail. So in a way, the capabilities I learned as a researcher, as a scholar, even helping me again also to be kind of in love with this level of details that I need to have for doing research, but I also need to have it in a way when I deal with Nampelka and startup topics. And the part about teaching is kind of, let's say, the putting both sides, so doing research on entrepreneurship, but also being an entrepreneur, putting them together and say, I have a lot of experience, so I, of course, would love to share my, let's say, unique experience and know-how, of course, also with others. So to transmit what I have gathered among other new future entrepreneurs or leaders that would like to have, let's say, a similar perspective and viewpoint. So for me, it is something very enriching, every single element, because you see how to connect, let's say, several points among those three different areas that can help you to really understand, let's say, the overall circle of entrepreneurship.
Wow, okay, that's really interesting. And okay, so the next thing I wanted to ask you is more related to your experience between countries. There's a book I've already mentioned on this podcast, and it's because it's one of my favorite I've read recently. It's called The Culture Map by Erin Meyer, and it talks about the various differences that you find between cultures. And it's something that really fascinates me. And the first thing I would like to ask you is how you feel entrepreneurship, like applied to entrepreneurship, how do you feel cultural differences apply even within Europe, so between Germany and Italy, if there are any particular entrepreneur, like a particular vision of entrepreneurship that's different or similar in both countries. So I was wondering around Germany and Italy, but also, of course, given your experience in Kenya, what are the cultural differences between, let's say, Europe and Africa in the entrepreneurship space? So it's a bit of a big question. Tackle it as in any way you want, but yeah, I'm interested in this cultural aspect.
Very interesting question, Alex. Thanks for asking. So to start with, because as you said, it seems like a rather big and broad question, there are two main differences for me. Not differences, but at the same time, let's say, phenomena that I have observed in various countries and in various continents. First is the point about that in a way, entrepreneurs and this typical startup scene, such as incubators, co-working spaces, accelerators, but also maybe elements and parts of universities, and the way how the people, the entrepreneurs behave and how they are in terms of their identity, attributes, is super similar no matter where you go. So I can provide you an example. If I go to if I go to Nairobi, okay, which is the capital of Kenya, maybe someone would expect that, wow, there you find something that's very unique, very culture related to the specific location, and it's so much different from what we know from Europe, for instance. It's not. It depends. If you go to the new emerging incubators or co-working cafes, bars, and so on, you have a very diverse, let's say, communities. So in terms of, there are a lot of Europeans, Americans, a lot of local people, all mixed up together. And even the style, you have to order your cappuccino, which is very similar to what you can see in London, in Berlin, in Paris, or in Milan. So in a way, what I really perceived as a funny point in a way is that no matter where you go, in a certain very strict environment of entrepreneurship and this very local startup scene, you have a very similar culture attributes, and you cannot make a big difference if this co-working space would be in Nairobi, in Sao Paulo, in Berlin, or in Tel Aviv, because they're very, very similar. This is one element that I have observed, which is kind of this unique and much aligning cultural element of the startup scene. A second one is that indeed there is still a big element also of culture when you go out of those hubs of entrepreneurship. So if you're not going to this typical hipster co-working space, but you go actually maybe to the rural area or to smaller cities in various countries and various continents, there you definitely can see a big part of culture and how different it is even between Germany and Italy. And here it's, for instance, if I just compare my hometown back in Germany, and they do not have this typical Berlin scene of entrepreneurship, there you really find those rather, let's say, traditional German SMEs that are trying to come up with new ideas, in which they might have some startups that emerge in, or they try to support some startups, some students coming out of universities. But this is very located to typical sectors that we have in the region of my hometown. It is very much related to some typical German culture aspects. Whereas, of course, if I go and travel around Italy and I'm in the south of Italy or somewhere, then, of course, it is again something completely different. I don't know, if you go to Sicily, you have a lot of entrepreneurship, but this is highly related maybe to food and beverage topics, which might be, again, then very different from what you can see in Paris, in London, or in Tel Aviv. So there are different, let's say, streams in which culture plays an aspect when it comes to entrepreneurship. I do believe and I do hope that the part about culture can, how can I say it, make a difference in a typical entrepreneurial behavior in each city or in each country. I really do hope that it will remain, especially because every context is different. And when we look at entrepreneurship, the starting point is that we have observed a need, an inefficiency, a problem, or a pain. And this problem and pain usually is in a specific context for a specific segment of people. So I truly believe that due to this starting point, there will be, even in the future, a big difference when we want to look at specific entrepreneurs and startups that might emerge in Turkey, Germany, or Italy in a way.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. And always talking about entrepreneurship, what I'm interested now in exploring is your experience with Nampelka. What does Nampelka mean, first of all? Like, what's the name? Like, where does it come from?
It was a very painful journey to find this name. So we started back then in 2016, 17 to find something which represents the idea of a nomade, because we were in love with the idea people traveling around and being in several cultural contexts. And we wanted to show that Nampelka is kind of having this attitude of traveling around and meeting various, let's say, countries, cities, and cultures. But of course, if you think about nomade and you try to register a brand, a domain, a profile on Instagram, everything is gone, it's taken. There are millions of businesses outside with this name. But we were kind of in love with this idea and the topic around it, because it really represents the DNA and the starting point of Nampelka. So it was a lot of talks, drinking wine, trying to be creative. So in the meanwhile, we came also up with something about nomade. This initial part is no, and no is always related to something negative. So we said, why not coming up with seamadate? So something about sea, so it is more positive in a way. Obviously, horrible name, we cannot do that. Thank God, after I don't know how many weeks, my ex-co-founder died. She found an indigenous language from which is Mapuche, from the south of Chile and the south of Argentina. And there was kind of this, let's say, platform where you can find all the words, like a dictionary. And she just wrote the idea of traveler, which is linked to our initial idea of nomade and traveling around. And what came out of this search engine, let's say, was that traveler in the old indigenous Mapuche means Nampelka, still with an F and E. We said, this F and E sounds a little bit too much to cafe, coffee, and people might get confused. So we said, why not just deleting those F and E at the end and keep it as Nampelka? It might be rather easy because it is for German people, as I'm German, so I could immediately say easy to pronounce. English-speaking people, easy to pronounce. Spanish-speaking people die immediately, see, yeah, that's fine. So even for Italians too. So we said, wow, that's nice, because finding some name or term which has even an interesting meaning, it is connected completely to our original idea, easy to pronounce. And then the next jackpot was actually that we tried to figure out the domain, still free. Nampelka Instagram website, still free. Facebook, still free. So it was in the middle of, I think, 2 a.m. in the morning, because time difference. And so me, 2 a.m. in the morning. We kind of registered everything immediately. And the next day after, we called the lawyer to do the next steps for the registration. So in a nutshell, Nampelka stands for traveler, and it's based on the indigenous Mapuche from the area Chile and Argentina.
I understand. Okay. And yeah, because I didn't know that. And that's really, I mean, I think every startup, at least that I can think of, comes up with their name in a different way. And I saw a post on LinkedIn the other day that like said, don't spend too much time on naming. In the end, like, it happens at some point. Okay. And what is the business model for Nampelka?
This is a very difficult question, because there are several business models. We have a current business model, which you can see when you go to the website, which is, let's say, the old starting version of Nampelka, in which we have wine from Argentina. It's biodynamic Malbec from a small winery, family business, and all the things. And we also added coffee, same ideas and values. It's a small farmer from Cameroon, linked to Africa, and 2 products that are highly connected, let's say, to the nature and made in a sustainable way. So we basically sell it online through our online shop, which is the old model. Now in the last weeks and month, we have worked a lot on the idea about what do we really want to do with Nampelka. So for me personally, the starting phase and the current business model, which you can see when you go on the website, has been a long experimentation, doing some, let's say, experience, understanding a little bit how the market works. And it was a little bit more, even fun, just trying things a little bit out. But we knew right from the start that this is nothing fancy. We do not have clear in mind a problem to solve. There are a lot of good wines outside, so it's a really hard market at the same time. And now what we have developed is kind of the result of all my personal experience that have been added also since 2017. So from 2017, my personal experience, what you can see in Nampelka, is being international, being in love with various cultures, traditions, and natural products. That's why the slogan is, we are not perfect, we are natural. What we add now is the element about we want to support female entrepreneurs from developing economies. And here, it's not a surprise, we will start with the African countries and more precisely with Kenya, because my own experience, I've been most of the times in Kenya. I've met a lot of great stories of female entrepreneurs, but I know, especially when it comes to farming, which is connected to the point about property rights, owning the land, and so on, which is maybe allowed officially, legally, but not really accepted on the culture side, as a matter of fact, that especially female entrepreneurs in developing economies struggle a lot. And we all know that in order to provide, let's say, contribution to sustainable development, we actually should focus on female entrepreneurs because they are usually the ones taking care of the family and providing every profit for the family and for the future of the country. And so the model of Nampelka will change. It will be a community-based business model in which Nampelka will be, let's say, will be the role of creating an ecosystem and connecting female entrepreneurs from the developing economies with a community, an international community that wants to support female entrepreneurs and that is interested in the topics of we are not perfect, we are natural, and what it means to be, let's say, a woman nowadays in various countries. It's something similar to the idea of crowd incubation. So the crowd, our community, can help the female entrepreneurs. And Nampelka is kind of the bridge in between.
So most of our listeners are interested in some way in entrepreneurship or in general the entrepreneurial spirit. What would be your message to them, or what is needed to be a successful entrepreneur, whichever of the two questions you'd like to answer?
There are several points that I guess I would like to share. One first point is do never ever lose the faith. This is linked to the point of, I can say that my whole personal journey and adventure started since I moved from my hometown to Hamburg. And then the next step, an important step, was getting completely out of my comfort zone by moving alone, completely alone from Hamburg to Milan. Then I went completely alone. I was just a couple of months in Milan. I went to Brazil, again, completely out of my comfort zone, which was in this moment even kind of too much because I just settled down in Milan, a lot of new friends. I needed to start from scratch, a new language because no word Italian before arriving in Italy. Then moving to Brazil. Okay, after Brazil, I went back to Milan. So a lot of let's say, steps in which I pushed myself out of my comfort zone, which is definitely helpful because there you have the moments where you realize what you really like, what is taking like your interest, your passions, and is an eye-opener in general. So all those things together, and then even saying I would like to do my PhD. I have worked also at the same time as an intern in another startup that has been based in Milan. There were a lot of points where, especially, let's say, also my family kind of asked myself, Alisa, what are you doing? There's so many different, I don't know how to say it, maybe projects or streams, interests in your life. You're doing so many things, but are you truly like believe you're going into the right direction? Does it really make sense? Would it make more sense to go back into the corporate context? And, it seems like everything is more like one highway and everything is clear about the future. But it was kind of, in my case, the opposite. And I honestly had a lot of moments in the last 10 years where I felt like, oh my God, is it true? Is it really something that I do a lot of different things and I kind of lose myself because I lose control of all the different moments, all the different interests, all the passions that I have because there are things that making me super curious. But I kind of continued going with this feeling of what I really like, what is interesting, what gets my curiosity and my passion. And it's since, let's say, 1 or 2 years that now I see that no, it was completely, let's say, right for me personally, because now I see how to connect the different people I met, the different interests I have, the different projects I have started. Now I really see how to combine them, and they're creating unique connections that are unique to me, but maybe even unique in general because they're based on my experience. And this experience I have built since more or less 10 years by continuously pushing myself out of the comfort zone. And even though in a lot of moments I thought, oh my God, that's even too much out of my comfort zone because I felt like losing my comfort zone at all and doesn't really understand what is my comfort zone anymore. But now I'm really happy that I never lost this faith and this, let's say, feeling of go on, go on, go on. There will be the moment in which you see everything in a way becomes clear. And I can say, yes, luckily, I feel that I get closer and closer to the moment that I see, let's say, or I can earn the benefits, the harvest out of all those different experiences that I've made. That is why one first important thing that I really strongly recommend to you future entrepreneurs, do not lose the faith. Go on, even if you believe that this road, this journey, this new project doesn't make sense. Go for it. If you have the right feeling and it representing your interest, your passions, go for it. Go for it and be relaxed because there will come the moment in which you see how the different topics are connected. Definitely. And
I just remember. Oh, sorry.
Go on.
No, I just remembered a thing I wanted to say regarding Nampelka and the different business model. It reminds me of an episode we recorded with Daria Illi from Illi Cafe. They have a similar program for female entrepreneurs in coffee, also in Africa. So it's very similar. Interesting to see that we have two similar sort of, even though completely different stories in completely different companies, similar kind of interest. And that was just a comment I wanted to make. The last question I wanted to ask you is, even though from what you taught us in class and also what you said earlier, VUCA times, impossible to predict, but if I were to ask you post-COVID, because we didn't really talk about COVID, we try and make conversations that are more not dependent on time, on a specific moment in time, but what if you had to make a prediction for how Like, what are the big trends, maybe one or two trends you're seeing in the entrepreneurial space because of COVID? How do you think things will change in that sense?
So, because of COVID, how this could change entrepreneurship? First of all, what I see, especially when we look at countries that might not be that privileged to join international conferences, international meetings, and so on, COVID-19 has not only negative consequences. So for instance, due to the fact that now all the networking events for several, let's say, countries, cities are basically only purely online, they're so much more or easier accessible for entrepreneurs coming from a not that privileged area. So first of all, what I strongly hope as a really strong point here in during the COVID-19 situation is that it is, let's say, a chance, an opportunity to connect really on a global scale. Global scale, that means that someone from Uganda can easily connect to an entrepreneur from Berlin, from Tel Aviv, or from New York. So that we really can open up and can learn from each other while being in the same, let's say, context and without traveling. So this is one first, let's say, hope and positive effect that I hope it could come due to COVID-19. Another element is kind of, let's say, not surprisingly linked maybe more to the topic of digitalization. Me personally, I'm very much interested into blockchain technology and its application. And I know that when we look at sustainability issues, maybe blockchain-based solutions might be challenging. But apart from this challenge, if we look at the opportunity that this technology can bring to us, this is for me a more general trend that I hope, let's say, COVID-19 has again shown that we can move on with technology, but we need to make sure to include us as users. And why we want to include us as users, we need to make sure that we include everyone and we're not starting to exclude someone. So we need to kind of go on with technology. That's fine, that we need it. We need it even more than ever, as we see with COVID-19 and all the vaccines and so on. But at the same time, it is also important that we have more and more entrepreneurs that are able to transform this technology into a business model that actually supports us as users to adapt to new technology. And this adaptation and the business model that we as entrepreneurs need to generate, need to make sure that we include big parts of the society. Because one thing that we can already unfortunately see, just take the situation even here in Italy, and we have homeschooling. It's fine if homeschooling works, where in a family, every child has its own laptop and there is a good internet connection and maybe even its own room. It is even more challenging if no Wi-Fi, no internet connection, only looking maybe on a mobile, too small, and in one room, the kitchen with other 4 brothers and sisters. In this case, we unfortunately, due to technology, it might be feasible, but we need to make sure that we include everyone and we're not starting to turn technology into something which is used for the elite society, which jumps, let's say, forward, lacking behind big slices of the society.
Okay, I think on that note we'll finish, and it's something I think we should all reflect upon. Thank you very much for accepting to come on our podcast, and I hope to see you soon in person, perhaps in Italy or somewhere else, drinking wine perhaps.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Definitely the invitation with a glass of wine works perfectly fine for me, especially when it is, of course, Malbec and Nampelka. So happy to have this glass of wine together. Thanks again, Alex.